Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. I'm Peter Lindbergh, the steward of the Stoa. The Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this very moment. And today we have a symposium, or I'm just throwing the name symposium on a series of podcast episodes and playfully called it the Unsuccess Symposium. Let us get successful so we can stop giving a shit about getting successful. And the first guest we have today I'm so excited, is David Allen. David is a legend. He's a business consultant. He created this book, wrote this book and a methodology called Getting Things Done. And I was showing David before. I had this in my office for like years, a Getting Things Done poster. So I looked at it as a inspiration. And they have the whole method there. So I'm a real big GTD geek, and anyone in the kind of success productivity literature knows the significance of this methodology. So how today's going to work, David and I are going to jam for a bit, for maybe 10, 20 minutes. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I'll call on you, unmute yourself. If you don't want to be on YouTube, because this will be on YouTube, just indicate that and I will read your question on your behalf. So that being said, David, welcome to the Stoa.
Peter, thanks for the invitation. Hi, everybody. Delighted to be here. Welcome from Amsterdam, where I live.
When did you move to Amsterdam?
7 years ago.
Interesting. A lot of people I know are wanted to go there for various different reasons.
It's a terrible place. Stay away. You never want to come. Go.
When I first went there, I almost got killed by bikes. You got to like dodge.
Talk about creating situational awareness. Just get on a bike in Amsterdam. Right?
Yeah.
It beats jet flying,
Totally. So we titled this session simply Getting Things Done in 2021. With that title in mind, is there anything, initial thoughts come alive for you that you'd like to share?
Do not create any New Year's resolutions. The worst thing you could do. The best thing you can do is clean up. Get clear. Get current, get rid of your backlog so you're ready for the surprises and the inspirations and the organic stuff that's going to emerge from you internally once things are clear. But clear space should be your goal. It doesn't mean you shouldn't set some sort of maybe goals or have a New Year's resolution, but come on. I'll be 75 next week. I don't know how many New Year's resolutions I haven't kept. I haven't kept track. But so that's my biggest thing. Is end of year is always a great time to do this. And let me just give you a little sidebar on that. Catherine and I, my wife and I, for years, we spend about 30 minutes at the end of every year making a list of everything we did in the last 12 months. New stuff, new things, places we went. We got a puppy. Our puppy died. We implemented this thing. Whatever, just a lot of current reality stuff, because there's a sense of closure that is not really complete yet until you acknowledge what you've done. And I think, the unsuccess factor, Peter, that you kind of triggered here, it sort of triggers the idea that, look, guys, the best thing to do is just to acknowledge what you actually have accomplished already. That will then clear the deck for you to be much clearer and much more organic about what's going to emerge like a helium balloon inside. Oh my God, we could do this. But that's hard to do. As I tell people, look, don't set goals, clean your toilet. If your day-to-day is out of control, folks, don't worry about the future. You're just going to create guilt and frustration. We got enough of that. So I just say, clean up. That's sort of my advice for end of year. And then what Catherine and I do, once we do that, great list, say, wow, what would we like to have on that list by the end of next year? And we just take 30 minutes and just do an informal, wow, it'd be really cool if X, Y, and Z happen. Really cool if X, Y, and Z happen. We actually don't pay much attention to that list once we make it. Just at the end of the next year, we take a look at it and go, oh, geez, look, wow, look what happened. Because as many of you probably know, just setting the intention internally And especially if you write it down, even if you never look at it again, internalizes, something in terms of our internal teleological mechanism that just makes it easier to recognize opportunities and recognize options to fulfill a lot of that stuff that you wouldn't see otherwise. But you don't have to work at it. So guys, don't sweat, relax, have fun, get some closure, and a little informal yay and what ifs. There's my advice for 2021.
Mm. I love that. And before we let people in, we're talking about how GTD is inherently compatible with Stoicism, the philosophy of Stoicism. And what came to mind when you were talking, one thing, maybe we'll get into an elevator pitch of what GTD is in a moment for people who don't know, but it's as a bottom-up system, essentially, or has a bottom-up component to it, where a lot of this goal-setting methodology is top-down. And I find a lot of people engage in goal setting out of fear, out of overcompensation, out of shame. And it's sort of like it stifles that creative energy. But when you kind of clear, like you said, you clear everything out, then what I call like the demonic energy, just the daemon, just channels through you, that creative spirit, and you get these ideas emerging. So I'm curious, and then the other thing I'll riff on is eudaimonia, which is one of the goals of Stoicism, is being in good relationship with the daemon, being in good relationship with the creative energy. So how do you see the system in relationship to these kind of philosophies like Stoicism and these more kind of mystical forces like the daemon?
Well, GTD is about getting clear. It's, here's a big secret, folks. Getting things done is not nearly as much about getting things done as it's about getting present with where you are and getting appropriately engaged with your life and your commitments. The way out is through. That's what I like about Stoicism. And a whole lot of what GTD is about is like, excuse me, could you just write down everything that has your attention that's not on cruise control? And most people go, oh my God, that's too much. It's too much. Yeah, what you resist, you're stuck with. So you're winding up with the ambient anxiety that most people are addicted to. So the way out is through, which is a big Stoic idea. Like, and what's current reality could be, I'm totally depressed. This is really awful. That's why I love Oliver Burkeman's book. If any of you haven't read it yet, The Antidote is one of my favorite books. And Oliver, by the way, is a GTDer. And he talks a lot about Stoicism, but a lot of that is about acceptance of current reality. And if you don't accept it, it's got you. So the way out is through. If what you resist, you're stuck with. Old personal growth axiom, guys. Come on. Anything you're not willing to acknowledge, and acknowledge doesn't mean that you want to dwell on it. No, conversely, you don't want to dwell on being depressed. Say, I am depressed, therefore. Now what? What do you want? I would like to be happy. Great. What's your next step? What do you need to do to get back in the driver's seat about where you're going? So, my mission in life, basically, at least professionally, and a lot of stuff that I've been doing for 35 years, is to create a world where people perceive problems as projects. How Stoic could that be? Right? There are no problems. There are only projects. I understand there are things that we identify as like, oh my God, something happened. Oh, what? Whether it's the pandemic, or my wife just told me she wants to divorce me, or my dog just pooped in the living room, or God knows what shows up out there, in those terms. But you have to go, okay, that happened. Now what? What do I need to have true, as opposed to letting yourself be driven and owned by your complaining and your victimizing? So, that's just, it's not a philosophy. It's just life's best practice. I didn't mean to riff too long on that, Peter, but that's what shows up as you asked.
Yeah. The obstacle is the way, and it's almost become like a Stoic daddy joke here. Every time something goes wrong, I always say, opportunity to practice our Stoicism. And
well, as I say, I'm not a motivational speaker, guys. I sleep as long as I can. And frankly, you don't have to like your life to get it off your mind. I'm just into freedom and clarity, right? By the way, look, I have not seen a jogger that smiles yet. It looks like they're having a really tough time. I'm sure they're smiling after they jog. The endorphins are popping in or whatever. But, happiness is highly overrated. As happy as you get, that's how depressed you'll get. I like the idea of satisfaction. right? Enough, take the Latin, enough activity or appropriate activity is satisfaction. And the reason for satisfaction is, by the way, I was just listening to this. Do you know that 50 years ago, the Eagles wrote a song called Peaceful, Easy Feeling? 50 years ago, right? That's all I'm about. That's all GTD is about. What do you need to do to get back to your peaceful, easy feeling? And then you can do with that whatever you want. You can be more strategic, more creative, more loving, cook better spaghetti, hit a better golf ball, have a better time writing your business plan. I don't know. When you're in that space, which is clarity and freedom of distraction, so you're present, what else is there? Or, well, I say what else is there? That's what I discovered. How do I get present with anything, no matter what's going on? And then I have to deal with everything so that I can.
I'm almost afraid to ask you this question, but I wonder if you could give an elevator.
Maybe I'm afraid to answer the question. I don't know. We'll see.
Obstacles the way. Elevator pitch on GTD for someone who's coming in totally blind to what this is.
Sure. If you want more clear space to be present with whatever you're doing, you need to capture stuff that has your attention, clarify exactly what it means and what you're going to do about it, if anything, park the results of that thinking in some trusted external brain, some external manager of categories and lists and reminders that you then review and step back and review and reflect on some regular basis. So you're feeling totally confident about your choices, about what you do, and as importantly, what you're not doing. So, by the way, if any of you have had your mind go anywhere else besides listening to me and Peter just for these few minutes, that's what I'm talking about. Where'd your mind go? It probably went somewhere that's you're not yet appropriately engaged with. If you went, oh shit, I need cat food. If that idea has popped into your head more than once, you're inappropriately engaged with your cat. Those thoughts should pop in once. You should have ideas, but again, your mind's for having ideas, but not for hanging on to them. It does a crappy job of that. So there's your 20-second or 30-second GTD. Capture stuff, has your attention, decide what it means, park the results in some trusted system, and then review it on some consistent basis, keep it current so that your mind is free to not have to remind anything. It just trusts the system to let you know what you need to then choose to make good optional choices about. That's it.
So start putting your questions in the chat. We'll pivot to it after this question.
By the way, I'm going to apologize. I don't have anything else to say other than what I just said. So, I'll add, that was a freeze-dried version, and I'll add water to any of that I said, but I'm not going to tell you anything different than what I just said. And very few people are doing what I just said in any consistent way. If you're keeping a calendar, you're already doing it to some degree. So you can't fight the issue. Your head's not for hanging on to it. Why do you have a calendar? If you don't think you should have listed all your agreements and be reminded of them regularly, throw away your calendar. Don't be intellectually dishonest.
So the last question I have is in terms of the legacy of GTD. I'm curious if you were surprised how it took off. There's like communities around it. There's they call it productivity porn. Like there's like blogs just dedicated to it. People wonder like, Peter, how do you get so much shit done at the Stoa and all the stuff that I do here? And this method is a part of it. And a lot of other people, like you said, are GTD fans. So I'm just curious how that landed for you. Did you expect that? Are you surprised?
Maybe this is I don't know if you call this a Stoic maxim or point of view, but ever since I went through my own sort of self-development phases back in the 60s and 70s in California, a lot of it came down to just high anticipation and no expectation. So I had no idea whether anybody's going to buy the book or not. I just needed to write it to get it out of my head. It took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out and that it was bulletproof and nobody could punch a hole in it. And then I had some friends say, David, you ought to write the manual in case you get run over by a bus, at least to be down there. At least somebody could pick it up and do something with it. And I had no idea if anybody could get this, if I could put it in a book. So that was a big milestone to write the first edition of it. It came out in 2001 to see whether anybody could get it, if they got the model. So I guess, Peter, simple answer is I was bemused by the life hack movement that this generated, the, all that stuff out there that kind of spun out of that. And of course, it took off in the tech world like crazy because the tech people were so enthralled with GTD. For one reason, they're almost as lazy as I am. Secondly, they love systems that have no leaks in them, that are bulletproof engineered systems. And also what it did was it gave them freedom to turbocharge whatever their cool favorite tool was because it's tool independent. So they got to then really use their paper planner. They got to really use Excel. They got to really use Asana. They got to really use, I don't know, there are hundreds of tools out there that have spun out of really this whole movement that showed up. So yeah, in one way, there are only a couple of billion books out there, that I've sold, and there's 7 billion people on the planet. How many of those folks still need this? So I got a lot of work to do still, because basically my mission is to get this to as many people that can use it, that would improve, no matter what they use out of this, will improve their conditions, which is going to improve their thinking process, which is going to move them up the food chain, which is going to have them have more confidence, and they're going to stop doing a lot of their negative behaviors that are coming out of their insecurities and fears. So there's it's kind of my 75-year-old assessment right now of my working hypothesis of what I'm about.
Cool. All right, we're gonna pivot to the chats now. I'll take in Ryan first. If you can unmute yourself, Ryan.
Yeah, David, this is awesome. I tried to institute GTD last year. I went through the workbook and everything. I was super psyched, cleaned up, and then everything came crashing down again and things became messy. So I'm wondering how I keep myself accountable with the system once
Just keep coming back to it, Ryan.
Yeah.
The biggest problem is you are willing to tolerate the ambiguity and weirdness and ambient anxiety that happened when it fell apart. I'm not. Right. So it's about raising the bar inside of yourself. How clear do you feel like you need to be at any time? As a matter of fact, at a certain point, you will get good enough with GTD that when those things happen, that brings you onto the GTD game, not off. There are a lot of GTDers that when the pandemic hit said, thank God I had GTD, because right quickly I knew how to set up my home office. I knew how to now restructure my kids now being at home all the time instead of being in school, yada, yada, yada. And they use the process to handle surprise. Again, not fun, but they're in the driver's seat. So you just need to get used to being in the driver's seat no matter what. That's why the hardest habit to change will be the weekly review. So if all you did was get everything out of your head and once a week step back and take a look at everything you got out of your head, you'll be so much further ahead of the planet in terms of moving up the food chain, in terms of how you are. But those are 2 big habits to change. Most people are using your head as an office. It's a shitty office. Right? And most people are not doing any kind of reflective review on any kind of consistent basis. So they're hugging trees instead of managing the forest. So those 2 behaviors out of GTD, called write it down, and of course, decide next action. That's another big key behavior, of the set. And then weekly reviewing, or on some consistent basis, reviewing all the stuff that you've captured externally. That will change your life. It'll change your life in a week. And if you could build that in as a regular habit, you'll just be way up the food chain. Life will be quite different. That help?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's super great.
Yeah,
thanks.
No, good question. It's a common thing, Ryan. That's why, see, I'm not a good trainer. I'm a pretty good presenter. But frankly, I don't have the patience to hang out with people. Look, I figured out the model here. You decide how much of it you want to use or not. But then we said, okay, we're trying to scale this methodology. Now we've got 90 countries represented, with certified trainers and coaches to do this stuff. But to get it from here to there, I had to pay attention to a lot of instructional designers that go, David, they slapped me around hard. Said, too complex, too heavy, too many things people look at. They read the book and get overwhelmed right away. I can hypnotize people with the presentation, but they walk away glazed and do nothing. So how do you then take this stuff if you wanted to actually have people then change their behaviors and actually implement this? That's why the workbook, by the way, glad to hear you got that. That's why we did that. But how do we simplify this so we lower the barrier of engagement, basically, to get people into these behavior sets? What's so bizarre is they're so simple. Everybody already does versions of this already. Everybody writes things down. Everybody's made lists. Everybody's decided the next action they need to do. Everybody's looked at some sort of a list. If any of you have ever looked at your calendar, so you even knew to get on with me and Peter at this time, you already did some sort of reflection of an external brain that told you, located yourself in space and time. So this is not a new foreign language or some new technology. These are very simple practices, but very few people do them in a consistent methodology that then allows them to have the clear space that's possible.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. And it's a true story. When I was arranging this with David, like a boss, he said, I organize my own calendar. I'm like, done. So I'll take in Rachel next.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm thinking about, like, on the organizational scale of a company, this kind of compulsion towards crisis of, wanting to have more to do, to feel worthy, to feel part of it, to feel connected. And then when, as a company, you get more efficient and you get more done, making that leap into, okay, how do we now as a full organization lean into the creative potential of what we're capable of doing together, of connecting different GTD systems?
It's your question, how to do that?
Yeah, or just any thoughts or advice and how to lean into
Sure.
that.
Believe me, the coolest executives, managers, supervisors, partners I've ever met are the ones that are totally present when they're sitting talking to me. They're just there. They're not distracted by too much stuff. As a matter of fact, they leave work early. Why? It's handled. They're not modeling work harder, sweat more, sweat more, sweat more. That's the way you get up the ladder. No, they're not. They are modeling being present. So what do you need to do to get present? And I suggest to you that being present will be one of the most attractive things and intimidating things you can do in your organization. Understood? So again, the organization may have an addiction to ambient anxiety, right? All you can do is handle yourself and get to that place yourself, and then watch what happens. In a way, I have to say, the better you get, the better you better get. Because when you get really good at this, you get really clear. One of the biggest issues will be yourself. You'll start to get so inspired, you'll take on so many more things than you could possibly even do because you think you can. And at some point, whether that takes 2 months or 2 years, believe me, I've had some of the most sophisticated people you'd ever meet that would testify to this, that at that time they go, wait a minute, this is not about just getting more done because I can. It's also about my quality of life and my clarity and my sense of freedom and my sense of creativity and my sense of, I don't know, what are all the golden goodies that you would like to have. And so at a certain point they go, wait a minute, I got to stop, because the incompletion is not about a project. It's about quality of an experience. Wow, I need to be more relaxed than I am right now. Wonderful. Got a project? How about that? I'd like to ensure that my life and work systems and processes are set up so I can have more relaxed time with my kids or in my kitchen. Great, you got a project. What's your next action? So again, projects from a GTD standpoint can get very subtle. Should I get divorced or not? Should we adopt? How am I going to handle turning 75? Those are things, and those are as much projects. Those are as much like as get cat food, and either one will wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you want to sort of surf on top of your life, you're going to need to identify all of that stuff. And that's true in an organizational setting as well. We've got a lot of organizations now that have been implementing this. So you can't teach an organization to read. You can't teach your family to read. You can only teach individual people to read, but you better have people who can read to make sure you have an effective enterprise, right? So you can't teach an organization to do GTD, though the principles are the same. If I walked into your team right now, if any of you are on a team of any sort of team, I walk in and go, what's got the team's attention? What's not on cruise control? See, the team has a purpose. If it doesn't, why are you a team? The team has some reason to be a team. I say, great, given the purpose, how are you doing? What's got your attention about fulfilling that or not? And then we're just going to go up to a whiteboard and do let's call this capture, right? Then we're going to do, okay, everything you captured here in terms of what got the team attention, what are these things? You know, are these things you need to move on, or is this just a crazy idea you're not going to move on? This is called clarify. What's got the team's attention, right? Step 2. Then you go, okay, that should be a project. You know, that's got to think. We need to make sure. And by the way, what's our desired outcome on that? We want to make sure that this got closure on this. We have resolution on this. We have finality on this. Whatever. Say, great. What's the next step? Gee, outcome and action. What crazy thoughts to have. It's the zeros and ones of productivity, but that's also the essence of the clarification process. Step 2. You wrote down mom on your to-do list. Why? You probably had one, so it's historical data, but why'd you write it down? Oh, it's her birthday. Ah, what are you gonna do about mom's birthday? I don't know. Yeah, so you've captured, but you haven't clarified yet. What do those things mean? What are you gonna do about them? And then even on the team, okay, here's the project, here's the next action. Who owns these? Who's got the project? Who's got the next action? And who's gonna keep track of that? And how often are we gonna review that? So then you have an organization and review process that's absolutely critical for teams. Where do we keep track of the stuff the team needs to keep track of? How often and in what detail does a recursion need to happen of review of whatever those things are that we have attention on? What does the team need to do to get the project off the team's mind? Quite simply. And that could be quite different for each project and each team, but that would be the driver. If it's on your mind, it ain't getting done. Right? So using those drivers, see, GTD is not some external thing to throw on top of something. It's just an uncovering of what the core best practices are from a business standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from a self-management standpoint. That makes sense? I didn't mean to preach too much, but you asked. That's what showed up.
It's helpful. Thank you so much.
Yay. Good question.
Brendan, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so my question is, so this is my first encounter with GTD, and I'm wondering if virtuous action is built into the system at all. And if not, I'm curious how you feel about GTD being used to empower someone who wishes to get nefarious things done.
I don't care. I don't care. Well, I care. I don't want people to do nefarious things, but all I'm teaching is a way to get something happen. It's like, does electricity care how you're using it? No. You're the one who decides how you want to use that. And you know, for years, I've a whole lot of my early years when I was doing a lot of corporate training was in the aerospace world of the US. These guys are making bombs, right? But I figure, look, if all I can do is add people's ability to feel confident about themselves, they'll be less interested in doing nefarious things. People do nefarious things out of their insecurities and their fears. You know, come on, there's a guy that's been running my ex-country, you know, or trying to, basically out of fear and insecurity, and created all that nefarious stuff. If he felt a lot more secure about himself, then he wouldn't probably have to do all that stuff to try to support his ego. So sorry, I didn't mean to get political, but that's what's going on out there. So at some point, believe me, people do more harm in personal relationships with each other than bombs, frankly, in terms of real hurt. So, pick your battles, So, I get it. But, and my wife will not let me do something for Monsanto because she hates the chemicals they're making. So, yeah, I give, so yeah. So I understand the idea, but, frankly, I've seen most of those people who are in those situations are not ill-intentioned people. They're just doing the best they can with what they can, with what they've got available in front of them. And a whole lot of those people, once they start to get more in control of their life and more confident about their ability to produce whatever they want to produce, they won't hang out in those environments. I've seen it. A lot of people who get GTD, people say, gee, how good is GTD for the organization? I say, well, be careful. You implement GTD, you might have a lot of people leave because they're just not going to stand people not being accountable to themselves and not being clear about what they're trying to do and not being accountable to keep track of agreements with each other. So, I hear you, Brandon.
Cool. So we have Joe Edelman from Human Systems here in our social design club. So I'll take in Joe.
Well, hi, David. Thank you. I read Ready for Anything and Getting Things Done ages ago, and they were really
Oh my God. Ready for Anything is my favorite book. I find somebody who's actually read it and likes it. I go, you're close in to me, guy. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, I liked it, but I actually think I liked it for a reason that I now consider a bad reason in me. Like all the martial arts metaphors and everything, it was really sexy for a part of me that thought that I think there's like sort of two misconceptions that I bought into then that made it really attractive. One is that accomplishing a lot or being in some kind of state of fluid flow-like productivity would make my life meaningful. And the other is that like my responsibility was related to, or my integrity was related to responsibility, to honoring my agreements, this kind of thing, and renegotiating my agreements as you write. And I found from living since then, and maybe you have too, because you wrote these books a long time ago, that neither of these things is true, that actually what makes my life meaningful is not what I get done or don't get done. And it's not about getting things done. In fact, it's much more happens in the space of not getting things done, in the space of trying to live in the relationships that I'm in and the situations I'm in the way that I believe in. So and often that's in direct conflict with getting things done. So if I have a meeting, I may have an outcome for that meeting, but trying to get to the outcome in the meeting leads me to treat people totally reliably in a way that's not really the way that I believe in treating people. And for me to really encounter the people that I'm in the meeting with, I usually almost always have to abandon the outcome. And similarly, if I'm trying to honor my commitments, if I'm focused on this kind of interpersonal responsibility, agreements, and so on, I'm not really honoring who I am. I find that being flaky or irresponsibly expressive or something is actually like a very important part of both what I find meaningful and who I want to become. And it's actually in opposition to the kind of integrity that I believe in now. What do you think about that?
What would, if none of that was a problem, what would be true?
What do you mean?
I said, if none of that was a problem, what would be true? How would you define all of that?
What was the problem in what I said?
You just said two problems. And by the way, you said, I'm trying to get things done. And so what I'm not getting done is a quality of life and a quality of personal experience and expression that I want. So you just told me different things you want to get done. So don't try to fool me that you're not into getting things done. You wouldn't have these.
It's not actually something that I want to get done. Like getting done.
Yes, you do.
Like,
you just said.
Let me explain what I mean. It may just be a terminology difference, but give me a second, okay?
Okay.
So getting things done for me means that the satisfaction comes when it's finished. So like if I want to spend time with my girlfriend, for instance, I can get that done. But the satisfaction doesn't actually come at the end, if you see what I mean. So maybe there's just a misunderstanding in terms of terminology.
The satisfaction comes from appropriately engaging with your relationship.
Okay.
The satisfaction comes from appropriately engaging. It's not about getting things done. It's about being appropriately engaged. Are you appropriately engaged with your health? Are you appropriately engaged with your teeth? Are you appropriately engaged with your cat? Are you appropriately engaged with how you're running meetings right now? Are you So you don't have to go very far to see, okay, so tell me, if your life is not on cruise control, why do you have any attention about that? What do you have attention on? What would be your desired outcome? And what would be your next step to move toward it or to appropriately engage with it?
Yeah, I mean, so desired outcome is in this frame of like it would happen afterwards, right? Like an
That's your
outcome.
frame. No, that's your frame, not mine.
So, what is
Desired
it?
outcome could be, I love experiencing fun on a consistent basis. I love having fun at a party. By the way, if you go to a party to have fun and you don't have fun, that's an inappropriate engagement with your party. You're unproductive. So if you want to be a nice guy in your meeting, excuse me, have nice guy in meeting as some sort of a desired outcome and say, what do I need to do anything about that? Or shall I just hold that as a vision and just sort of let myself morph toward that as I hold that picture in my mind? All those are fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm sorry, Joseph, you're actually, I'm really glad you brought that up. So it was a great issue to bring up because most people have a perception about both productivity and getting things done, this sort of mechanical, do more, make that happen more toward more physical material things that I think I want. But getting things done, hey, how about fulfilling your life purpose? That's an incompletion. That's a project. How you doing? Right?
I feel
wait. I'm going to time out here because this is going to be a battle of epistemologies. Because I know Joe. He has a brilliant philosophy on values, and it probably is counter to yours, David. But for the sake of letting other people ask questions, I'm gonna just jump in there if that's okay.
Fine with me. Hey.
This is the Stoa. You're going to get questions from all over the place. I'm going to take in Ryan next. Ryan.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I'm curious on some methods and techniques for motivating others. So say your task, your personal task is to get others to be more productive, but they are not interested or not very successful or have roadblocks. What are some of your thoughts on performing that motivation?
I think you'd have to decide at what horizon are you saying getting people more motivated? One horizon I had was write a book and then give it to the world and see who buys into it. Another one is, gee, I'd like my 14-year-old to be better at cleaning his or her room. So, you got multiple levels of wanting people to do something that they're not doing and want to have them more motivated to it. So a lot of it is like, well, very specifically, I couldn't give you a general answer on that other than who is it? What are they doing? How important is it that they have a different behavior than you? And then what might you need to do to either educate them, inform them, or engage with them in some different way that would get them to do that? So it's quite specific to this specific situation. Do you have a specific example? That'd be easier for me to answer.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit more on the engagement techniques. So in this case, it's like work relationships. So like manager-employee kind of scenarios. And so the employee is not, completing, X amount of output or whatnot,
right.
To complete it.
How clear is the role they have? How clear is the agreement they've made? How clear is it that the person who is managing that and cares about that, keeping track of that on some consistent basis to make sure they light fire, kick butt, or do whatever they need to do to manage the status of the project and the person? So again, quite specific. So if you're giving me, you're asking a very general question that would be very different depending on who I'm dealing with and why and what the relationship. If it's your boss, probably a different way to engage with it than if it's your assistant.
Right. Yeah, I think
a lot of it, but come on around. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to what are your agreements with them? What have they agreed with you about? Are you keeping track of that? And then how do you manage the conversation if that agreement is not being kept from your perceptions? That's why the waiting for list is such a powerful list. Believe me, the hundreds of thousands of hours I spent one-on-one with some of the busiest executives you'd ever meet, they're waiting. Once we created a waiting for list, they went, oh my God, that changed my life. So they could then keep track of the stuff that they've asked people to do or contribute to them or whatever. Some very top executives create a list called projects waiting for or projects delegated, because many times they've handed off a big thing to a pretty key person on their staff, but they want to sort of keep track of that in another sort of format. so that then when they have one-on-ones with that person, they can bring up that list and go over it with them. It's a lot about communication, but a lot about the clarity of role and clarity of agreement. Those things have to, if those aren't clear, none of this works.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely, clear kind of agreements. So kind of lay out, hey, you have to complete, X number of tasks, within the day. The tasks are well defined. Then at the end of the week, you kind of review it and say, hey, you only completed, 4 out of the 5 things on your list, or 2 out of the 5 things. Why is that? And, I find like a lot of times the responses are vague, like, oh, I don't know, I got distracted, or, oh, no, I'm not really sure what happened. So how do you kind of lean into those situations and kind of get people to elaborate more on why they're...
Again, it depends on your relationship to them. First of all, fire their ass.
Mm.
You said you were going to do it, you didn't do it, you're gone. Another one is, wait a minute, I've got about 5 years to train this person, so let me coach them. Let me take what they did, what they didn't do, maybe a better way to approach that. So again, it's quite unique to your situation. But again, when you get clear agreements and they don't keep the agreement, you need to deal with that. They need to deal with that. They need to deal with what the consequences of that are. And a lot of times people agree to stuff because they are not clear what all their stuff is. So they go, oh yeah, 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 yeah. And everybody goes, yeah, 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 because they haven't seen their whole game. And they couldn't say, well, that's really cool, boss. But by the way, can I show you my project list right now? If I take this on, which looks pretty cool, some of this is going to have to go. And I want to make sure we're singing off the same song sheet about which ones I take energy off of right now that you've given to me to do this new thing. How many of you are confident that you would have that clear a conversation about what your work is and what your agreements are? Try this. Very few. If you have, good for you, right? That means you sort of got this already. But that's, this is not fun stuff. This is real stuff. But how do you manage those agreements? How do you manage the relationships between them? So I didn't mean to preach again, but I guess I did. But yeah, that's how I would certainly deal with it.
Cool. Rosie has a really good question. Rosie, if you can unmute yourself.
Sure. So I just wanted to ask, I think sometimes distractions can be your subconscious way of telling you that maybe you should refocus your priorities. Maybe your stated goals are not quite what you should be investing all of your time into. So I was just wondering if this process that you described of, really evaluating like where you're at candidly, whether you think that's sufficient to make sure that your priorities are the right ones.
Great question, Rosie. By the way, that's why I came up with GTD. My personal style is I love to be free to follow my intuitive, spontaneous choices, moment to moment. So I just got what I did was figure out how to get rid of all the stuff that prevents me from being able to listen to that still small voice that may say, David, stop. You need to go spend time with your dog or with your wife or with yourself or whatever. So that's the whole purpose of this, is to be able to open you up to your intuitive wisdom, the higher self, your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call that. Everybody's got a still small voice. That if you really listen to it well, whether that's your soul or your liver or whatever you want to listen to, that says, hey, stop doing that, do this now, and start to pay attention to that. And then live and learn, because those voices that can come from a lot of different places. Some voices just say, just go procreate or eat. Some voices say, listen to great music and get inspired. Some voices, and every one of you, by the way, if any of you want to wonder how to manage an organization, just listen inside your head. We've all got a committee in our brain. I'm sorry. Many times, people in my committee in my head are throwing plates at each other. No, I don't know that. I don't know that. Whatever. So if you think just managing an organization, just managing your own committee inside your head, and where are those voices coming from? And there's one way to make sure you get better at that. And that's automatic. It's just called get older. Relax. Just hang out, get older, find out, and follow your hunches, and then see where it goes. Because many times some of the coolest things you will do will seem like make no sense at all in any other way, other than just that just seems like something I want to do. People have often asked me, David, if I were to go back to my 21 or 25-year-old self and say, what advice would I give me? I would do more of that. David, pay more attention to what you want, not what you think everybody wants of you.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, good luck.
All right. Chris, you're up next.
Hey, David, thanks for coming on. Meditation has afforded me to know how much my body does not agree with my mind, and so I've gotten more clear. I'm curious what you think of embodied self-awareness and how it plays into the role of productivity, because the voices in your head would cause somatic experiences. And so that I've used that to see which ones I should take care of. What do you think about embodied self-awareness?
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what that means. I mean, my homeopathic doctor does muscle testing, with the different things. So the body actually has some intelligence to it that I trust. It's one of my voodoos. I've got about 16 voodoos that I use. I think, astrology and all those other things, and whatever. So I think there's a lot of message that your body probably has, but I think basically your spirit, is the one that embodies the body. And so that's the thing I would listen to. So I think, a lot of GTD is not spiritual itself, other than everything is spiritual, in which case it would be. But what it does is, if you have an inclining or an intention to listen to the more subtle voices and information, sounds, and sources of energy that you need to quiet your world in order to be able to get to. See, the universe is always on. The universe is never quiet, guys. Come on. We get quiet so we can listen to different parts of the universe that are always on, always on. So I would suggest listening to that part of you that also sort of informs your body. And yeah, there's probably good information your body has as well. But I'm not sure exactly what you mean by all that, because I'm not a real expert in that area that I think you touched on, other than just trusting my chiropractor and my homeopathic doctor and my, all these people that, use various voodoos to say, gee, David, you need to take this homeopathic right now because of this thing that showed up in your body. So I think the body has a lot of intelligence to it itself, but also the intelligence is really driven by higher levels of the energy fields that we're engaged with, that you can't see, but you have access to. So that would be I would listen more to what my spirit's telling me than what my body's telling me. I listen to both. I listen to both. No, come on, don't ignore either one, because the spirit may be using your body as the information vehicle.
All right. We might have time for 2 more questions. Othman, you had a question.
Hi. Yeah, so my question is related to something that you said at the beginning or at the end of the first phase about insecurities. And so I'm curious to understand how you made the jump between using GTD and working through insecurities.
Ask anybody who's implemented GTD and see how much more secure and confident they feel about themselves. Nobody's not going to raise their hand. This just, all this does. Look, every one of you at some points felt a little overwhelmed or confused. You sat down, you made a list, you felt better. Correct me if I'm wrong. Everybody's done that. Nothing changed in your world, except the one thing that changed, the most critical thing to change, was how you were engaged with your world changed. So simply making the list got you more involved from a higher perspective in space and time about who you were and what you were doing. So you felt a lot more confident about going to the grocery store. Believe me, I had to go to the grocery store today or yesterday, I don't know. And I said, Catherine, is everything on the list? She said, I think so. So I went and looked and said, okay, I think this is it. Yeah, that's it. Great. I'm feeling a lot more confident when I go to the store. Gives me the freedom to actually buy stuff not even on the list. Why? Because I got the list. So what do you call that other than greater confidence? But you could take that to multiple sophisticated levels. How confident are you about why you're on the planet? How confident about your core values and what really, really matters to you? How confident about your vision of success 5 years from now, about how you'd like to be career-wise and otherwise? How confident are you, by the way, are the things you need to accomplish over the next year or two to make sure all that happens? How confident are you about how you're handling your health, your finances, your relationships, your fun factor, your pets, your career, your spiritual life? How confident are you about all the projects you have about all that? How confident are you about all the actions that you need to do to move all those things forward and to feel appropriately engaged with them? So don't shoot the messenger. All I'm doing is letting you know, if you got those things under control, believe me, your sense of self-confidence and self-efficacy are going to go out to the roof. That's why I mentioned earlier, that's one of the problems is people's sense of self-confidence gets so big, they start to overwhelm themselves with, options and possibilities. So that's another issue you have to deal with.
Thanks.
This will be our last question. Where was it again? Paul, that was the question on the management.
Hi. Yeah, so as a manager, I resonated with what you talked about a few minutes ago about employees sort of, when you're asking them to get something done and they're asking you where to prioritize it in their existing list. I generally call that managing your manager. And I feel like some employees have backbone and are able to do that naturally and others don't. And it's one of the hardest things I find to coach. Is it something that you've run into, and do you have suggestions around that?
I think it's true for everybody. Anybody that you've put up as an authority figure is going to be intimidating to you to show up and be vulnerable. So I just have them do some personal growth training. Make sure they feel more confident about themselves and who they are and what they're asking and what they want. Mm-hmm. And GTD would help. They'll feel a lot more confident about what they're doing with their work and their life, and they make it a lot easier to say yes or no. See, most people just say yes because they don't know how much they have. They have no idea. Once they get that idea, they may go, okay, yeah, well, I'll take that on. But then there, at a certain point, people just get a lot more conscious about what it is. But see, they're all still trying to manage their life in their head, which is a shitty office, right? And so there's no way they're going to be able to manage relationships between the commitments they make. As soon as you have more than 4, you're dead, or you're going to be suboptimal. You'll be driven by latest and loudest. So when you're dealing with people who are driven by latest and loudest, there's no help there other than just maybe feel more confident about themselves, so they're okay being driven by latest and loudest and just showing up and just using their ego to try to blast through and get what they want to get done, as opposed to, let me just be objective about who I am, what I'm doing, what I'm committed to, what my roles are. I think role clarification is a huge, huge issue. Our company implemented something called holacracy about 10 years ago that was quite rigorous about defining what roles are. What's your role and what's the purpose of that role? And so unclarity of roles is always going to create ambiguity and stress and weirdness out there. Is this your job or mine? Right? And that's such a key area of clarity, to know what should I take on and what am I agreeing to and why, etc. So again, that comes back more to consulting or an organization development, kind of an issue that you may have about those kinds of things. But good to say, okay, what GTD would mean, do you have any attention on this? Great. What's the next step? What do you need to do? Do you need to give your folks some training? If you're the manager yourself, do you need to then have a heart-to-heart talk with your folks, either one-on-one or as a group? Hey guys, I want to get clear about something. I have a sense you guys are feeling overwhelmed a little bit or whatever. And it'd be nice to know just kind of what's on everybody's plate right now. So let's just do a sort of a team data dump, and just get what's out there so we can kind of all agree. One of my biggest champions, a guy who's a very, very senior guy at HP, and one of the things he does is he uses a piece of software called The Brain. fabulous piece of software. It's kind of like a mind mapping software. And before he does his team meetings, he shows everybody his brain. By the way, let me show you guys what I am not doing. Let me show you everything that's on my plate right now. Right. So he demonstrates that vulnerability. I got more to do than I can do. You know, I'm having to make hard choices right now about what I'm doing. And I'm sure you guys are all in that same boat. So, you know, if you're willing to step up to that level of vulnerability and that level of transparency, boy, that's going to take you to a whole new level of game with a team.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. And we're reaching the top of the hour, and we have another event at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I wanted to give David any kind of final thoughts or words that you'd like to leave us with.
No, these are great questions. Great, cool group of folks, Peter, that you've attracted or gathered together here. And so stay in touch. You know, just do www.gettingthingsdone.com. You'll see where we're doing training and coaching around the world. You know, and just keep on keeping on. Beautiful. It was fun. And stay safe and wash your hands and laugh.
Thank you so much for coming, David. It's always a treat meeting a fellow Stoic and a fellow GTDer, and so having in one and the person who created it is a special treat for me. So thank you so much for coming to Stoa. I'd love to have you back. And so then we have a lot of cool events coming today in this Unsuccess Symposium. One, if you like this session in particular, we have one of the leading scholars in researchers in procrastination, Piers Steele. Procrastination is the new normal. He's going to have a transperspectival lens or look at procrastination. So procrastination from a philosophical point of view, from a psychological point of view, from a sociological one. So it's going to be quite interesting. That's 3 p.m. Eastern time. And the event that we have at 11 is Malcolm Ocean, who's in the room right now. Malcolm, do you want to plug that event?
Yeah, so basically in a couple minutes, I'm going to be talking about a system called Complex, which is a sort of, it looks like a to-do list, but it's kind of inside out, upside down, because it's very sort of the opposite of GTD. It's very much focused on just like make a list, but just for today. And then at the end of the day, instead of all the things staying on the list, they just go into the past as things I didn't do yesterday. And then today make a new list. So it has the same kind of intuition quality that David was pointing at being the whole point of GTD, but it gets at it a different way. And so I'll be sort of talking about that, and then my protege Yatharth will be running people through some interesting phenomenological exercises to get people in touch with a different experience of that. Cool. Yeah, so that's coming up in just a couple minutes.
Cool. So that's on the chat. You can do that. And this whole day is a different cross-pollination of frameworks, ideas, and regarding effectivity and success. So I hope you enjoy it. That being said, David, everyone, thanks for coming to Stoa today.
Bye, guys. Yeah.